Three scary stories for Christmas Eve. Christmas is my all-time favorite holiday, but the events of one Christmas Eve have haunted me ever since. This happened when I was just 12 years old in 2019. That year, my family and I decided to spend Christmas at my cousin's house. The night started like any other holiday gathering, filled with joy, laughter, and good food. We spent the evening enjoying each other's company, sharing stories, and reveling in the holiday spirit. The air was filled with the scent of pine, cinnamon, and sugar cookies. After dinner, we exchanged gifts and then gathered around the fireplace, sipping hot cocoa as the snow fell gently outside. It was the perfect Christmas Eve, or so I thought. As the night grew late, everyone began to feel the weight of the day's festivities. We were exhausted, and it seemed like the perfect time to call it a night. We had planned to leave early the next morning, but for now, we were going to rest at my cousin's house. My cousin's guest bedroom was spacious and warm, and I quickly found comfort beneath the thick, cozy blankets. But sleep didn't come easily. My mind kept racing. It wasn't that I was particularly excited, but something about the night felt off. A strange sense of unease settled over me, although I couldn't quite place why. Eventually, though, I drifted off, my tired body finally giving in to the pull of slumber. Then, I woke up. It was 4 o'clock. The house was quiet, but there was an unmistakable sound coming from downstairs footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps. My heart began to pound as I tried to convince myself that I was just imagining it. It was the middle of the night, and I was alone in a guest bedroom in a house filled with family. Surely, it was nothing. But deep down, I felt that creeping sensation of something not quite right. Against my better judgment, I pulled myself from the bed and quietly crept toward the door. I peeked out into the hallway, my breath catching in my throat as I moved toward the stairs. Every creak of the floorboards beneath me seemed too loud, but somehow no one stirred. I reached the wooden railings that separated the stairs from the living room below and peeked through them. What I saw nearly stopped my heart. In the dim light coming from the Christmas tree, I saw a figure standing beneath it. At first, it looked like someone dressed as Santa Claus, sorting through the presents. A man, tall and wearing a traditional red and white suit, looked under the tree, seemingly unaware that I was watching. I stared at him, confused and unsure if I was still dreaming. It couldn't be. Santa was supposed to visit when I was asleep, right? I ran back upstairs in a panic and shook my dad awake. "Dad, Santa's downstairs." He came back. My voice was frantic, filled with confusion and fear, but my dad didn't seem to share my alarm. He rolled over, groggy and irritated, clearly not wanting to entertain a child's wild imagination. "Go back to sleep," he mumbled. But something in my gut told me this wasn't normal. There was no way I could sleep now. My dad, still half asleep, begrudgingly got up and followed me downstairs. But when we reached the living room, there was no one there. No Santa. No strange figure. Just an empty room filled with nothing but holiday decorations and the fading glow of the tree lights. My dad tried to calm me down. "It was just a bad dream, kiddo," he said, ruffling my hair. But I knew what I saw. This wasn't a nightmare. Something had been down there, and I wasn't imagining it. I couldn't explain it, but the feeling of dread that washed over me was unmistakable. We went back upstairs, but sleep didn't come easy. My mind raced as I tried to make sense of what I had just seen. But sleep eventually overtook me, and I drifted back into a restless slumber. Morning came, and the day seemed to start like any other Christmas day. The family woke up, gathered in the kitchen, and began preparing breakfast. But as my uncle went downstairs to grab some drinks from the basement, something strange caught his attention. One of the basement windows was shattered, the glass scattered across the floor in a jagged mess. "What happened here?" my uncle muttered under his breath. The room fell silent as everyone gathered to inspect the damage. But nothing prepared us for what came next. My dad and uncle began to check the rest of the house, moving from room to room, searching for anything else that seemed out of place. That's when we heard it. A loud crash from upstairs. The attic. My dad and uncle rushed up to investigate, and the rest of us stood frozen in place, unsure of what to do. My heart raced in my chest as the sound of shouting echoed down the staircase. We all ran outside, and my dad quickly dialed the police. When the officers arrived, they went straight inside, their flashlights cutting through the darkness of the house. It wasn't long before they emerged with someone in tow, someone dressed as Santa. The man was older, with a disheveled beard and tattered clothing beneath the red suit. But what shocked us even more was the large knife he carried. The police quickly subdued him, but what struck me most was the officer's statement as they led the man away. "This wasn't the only house he broke into tonight," the officer explained. "There have been reports of similar break-ins all over the neighborhood." As it turned out, the man dressed as Santa wasn't just breaking into homes for presents, he had a much darker intention. The police later informed us that there had been a string of attempted kidnappings in the area, with perpetrators using the guise of Santa Claus to lure children. We were all shaken. What could have been a simple holiday mischief turned into something far darker. But that wasn't the end of the strange occurrences for me. Later that night, while reflecting on everything that had happened, I overheard the officers talking about other recent incidents. Apparently, there had been multiple reports of sightings at the local mall where children had gone missing, only to later be found in strange, unexplained circumstances. The more I thought about it, the more the events of that night seemed connected. It was all too much for me to handle. I had witnessed something that wasn't just bizarre, it was terrifying. The man in the Santa suit wasn't just some stranger. He was part of something far bigger, something far more sinister than I could have ever imagined. I couldn't shake the feeling that we had narrowly escaped a terrifying fate that Christmas Eve. Looking back, I still don't know what to make of the figure I saw that night. Was it truly Santa, or was it something else entirely? The fear that gripped me in that moment is something I can never forget, and it serves as a reminder of how easy it is to be fooled by appearances. How easy it is for something to appear harmless, when, in reality, it could be anything but. This Christmas, I'm not taking any chances. I'll make sure to keep a close eye on the things that seem too good to be true. And I'll always remember that Christmas of 2019, the year that everything changed. This didn't happen to me, but to a close friend of mine. To avoid any confusion, I will write this story from his perspective. This happened several years ago when I was about 14. My family had planned a weekend getaway to visit my uncle in Maine. We were going to stay in a cabin because my uncle's house was too small to accommodate everyone. We arrived at the cabin on a Thursday night, and the plan was to stay until Sunday. It was Christmas Eve when we got there, and the air was crisp, sharp, and filled with that kind of holiday magic that makes everything feel a little different, like something just beyond the reach of reality. I'll give you a brief layout of the cabin, so you can understand how isolated it felt. It was a small, single-story ranch-style house with 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, a dining room, an outdoor balcony, and 1 bathroom. We unpacked our belongings, settled in for the night, and the quietness of the cabin enveloped us. The only sounds were the occasional creaks of the wooden floorboards, and the light of the Christmas tree we set up twinkled in the corner of the room. The next morning, we headed to my uncle's house and spent the entire day there. We helped prepare a Christmas dinner and had a small fire going outside, making the most of the day. After a long day of celebration and holiday cheer, we drove back to the cabin, extremely exhausted. I got washed up and ready for bed, expecting a peaceful night of sleep. However, when I exited the bathroom, I felt something strange. A heavy, dreadful sensation settled in the pit of my stomach, and an uneasiness swept over me. It felt as if something was wrong, as if something was inside the cabin with us. I'm a firm believer in the paranormal, which I guess only made the situation worse. I cautiously made my way toward the dining room. The air felt thick and oppressive. When I entered the room, I looked toward the back of the room where the window was. The moonlight outside had bled into the room, casting a dim, eerie glow. As my eyes adjusted to the darkness, something in the corner of the room caught my attention. There, standing at the back of the room, was a dark figure. A pair of red eyes stared into mine with what can only be described as malicious intent. The fear that shot through me was like nothing I had ever experienced. Yet, for reasons I still can't explain, my next actions were completely inexplicable. I remember walking towards the bedroom, avoiding the figure in the dining room. I don't know why I didn't scream or run or even panic. It was almost as if my brain went into autopilot mode. I couldn't explain it then, and I still can't explain it now. I woke up at exactly 2:17 a.m. to the sound of heavy footsteps in the hallway. At first, I could have passed it off as my parents or my siblings getting up for something, but the footsteps were slow, deliberate, and they were getting louder and louder as they approached my bedroom door. The sound was unmistakable. Someone was coming closer. My worst fears came true when I heard my bedroom door slowly creak open. I was frozen. I could barely breathe. I ducked under the covers, hoping that whatever it was would just go away. But my prayers fell on deaf ears. Suddenly, I felt something sit at the end of my bed. A cold, heavy presence. The hair on the back of my neck stood up, and a low, menacing growl filled the air. I shot up, like a firecracker had just gone off inside my chest. My heart was racing, and my breath was shallow. I caught a brief glimpse of a black silhouette sitting at the edge of my bed, its red eyes gleaming with malice. It was unlike anything I had ever seen. It was almost as if it was looking directly into my soul. My body refused to cooperate, and my feet refused to move as the growl echoed in the room. I bolted for the door, screaming for my parents. My parents rushed to calm me down, asking what the commotion was about. I told them everything I had seen, but of course, by the time we returned to the bedroom, there was nothing there. No shadow, no figure, no growl, nothing. My parents did the obligatory. It was just a nightmare lecture, brushing off any possibility of paranormal activity. I was baffled. I knew exactly what I had seen. I'm not crazy. I know the difference between nightmares and reality. And what I saw that night was real. We continued our stay until Sunday, but every night after that, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every time I walked past the dining room or glanced out the window, I half expected to see those red eyes staring back at me. But they never appeared again. To this day, I have no idea what I saw in that cabin that night, and I have no intention of going back to find out. Now, fast forward a few years to Christmas 2019. I was 12 years old at the time, and this Christmas became a memory I'll never forget. We had gone to my cousin's house to celebrate the holiday, just like we did every year. It was a fun night. Everyone was in high spirits, sharing stories and exchanging gifts. But that night turned out to be far more terrifying than anyone could have anticipated. We decided to stay at my cousin's house for the night and leave early the next day. We settled down in the guest bedroom and fell asleep quickly. The house was quiet, and the soft glow of the Christmas lights made everything feel peaceful and safe. But that peace didn't last long. Suddenly, I woke up at 4 o'clock, hearing strange noises coming from downstairs. I was tired, and my first instinct was to ignore it. But something in me pushed me to go check it out. I slipped out of bed, careful not to wake anyone, and crept down the stairs. As I peered through the wooden railings into the living room below, I saw something that made my blood run cold. A figure, dressed in a Santa suit, was kneeling by the Christmas tree, rummaging through the presents. I froze in place, my heart thudding in my chest. The figure didn't seem to notice me at first, but when it did, I bolted back upstairs and woke up my dad. "Dad, Santa came back. He's downstairs." My dad, still groggy from sleep, seemed alarmed by what I said. We rushed downstairs, but when we looked in the living room, there was no one there. My dad tried to calm me down, suggesting that I must have just had a bad dream. We went back to bed, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The next morning, everything seemed normal, at least on the surface. Everyone woke up, and we began preparing breakfast. But my uncle went downstairs to the basement to grab some drinks, and that's when we found something truly horrifying. One of the basement windows was completely shattered. At first, no one knew what to make of it. My dad and uncle quickly checked the house to see if anything had been stolen or damaged, but nothing seemed out of place. Just as they finished their search, a loud crash came from the one place they hadn't checked, the attic. They rushed upstairs, and what happened next was a blur of shouting and panic. We all rushed outside, and the police were called. When the officers arrived, they immediately ran inside the house, and a few minutes later, they brought a man dressed as Santa outside. We later found out that this man had a large knife on him. The officers informed us that not only had my cousin's house been broken into, but there had been multiple break-ins up and down the block. But that wasn't all. There had also been several reports of attempted kidnappings of young children at the local mall again by people dressed as Santa. We were all shaken, and I couldn't help but feel that the terror of that night would haunt us forever. It was Christmas Eve, a time that should have been filled with warmth and joy, but instead, it became a nightmare we'd never forget. And as we sat around the table that morning, exchanging gifts and trying to make the best of it, I couldn't stop thinking about the figure I'd seen downstairs. Who was it? What were they really after? And what else could be lurking in the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to strike? This Christmas, I decided I wasn't going to let fear rule my life. But sometimes, even the most joyful holidays come with hidden dangers, ones that you may never see coming, no matter how hard you try. So, if you're ever out on Christmas Eve and you hear a soft rustling sound coming from the shadows, just remember, some things are better left unseen, because you never know who or what might be watching.